Hello and welcome to Scottish Liberty Podcast episode 64 with me, Antony Sammeroff.
And me, Tom Laird.
Today we have another extra special guest, Ryan, the Meme Policeman, who is visiting us from the States. He is here in Edinburgh with Tom and I. Say hello, Ryan.
Hello, it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
So if you haven't heard of the Meme Policeman yet, you certainly should have. Ryan makes a hobby out of debunking statist memes. So if you've ever seen one of those memes up on Facebook or Twitter that says some ridiculous conclusion, he goes and fact checks them and writes very well written articles on those, and he's here to speak to us today. So Ryan, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into being the Meme Policeman?
I think I started about 2 years ago. I always noticed, some of my friends, they'd always, post those annoying memes, and it seemed like I would frequently, do a little bit of research and write comments when they posted. I'm like, hey, this is complete BS, basically. So, and then I got the idea actually when Tom Woods had his special for where you could start a website and he'd publicize it. I'm like, oh, I should really start a website, and I'm like, what should I do though? I'm like, and it just hit me. I'm like, oh, why don't I bust memes and make a website out of that? So I went on and I was searching for domains that were available. I typed in Meme Police, and Meme Police was taken. So
right.
But Meme Policeman was still available. So I'm like, sweet, and I grabbed it, and from there I just ran with it. Early on, I think I had about 25 followers when I first started. Just family, friends, and then
sounds familiar.
Yeah. When Tom publicized it on his podcast, I think in just a couple days it shot up to about maybe 100 likes, and from there I kind of staggered on up to where we are now, which is kind of fairly successful, mid-range, I'd say. So yeah, that's kind of the brief story behind it.
Okay, what when you say it started out an idea? Did you say it was an idea you had when you were on campus, or was it because those annoying memes were flying around the campus? Which campus was it?
You mean college?
Yeah.
Oh no, I was actually out of college by then. So
all right, okay.
Yeah, it was just my friends, Facebook friends, basically. That
right.
Because usually and I didn't even know where some of these things came, and the thing with memes is that unfortunately they kind of have evolved to bring a lot of opinions and political points to life, but they're hardly ever vetted. They're hardly ever have any sources behind them. They just appear and state something, and people share them as because they kind of sound authoritative, because they're like they'll list some claims, and
if they sound compelling.
They're kind of a modern version of the old propaganda posters that you used to get during the war and stuff like that. That's how they look to me. It's like just a higher technological version of that. Can you remember the first one that really kind of burned your toast, so to speak?
Well, one of the earlier ones I did because when I first started, it wasn't even totally political, because I was looking at all these, like for instance, one early on was it was a picture of like fast food burgers that said that if you have a McDonald's hamburger and 2 years later it looks like the exact same, so therefore it's like some creepy chemical concoction that's like poison.
Okay.
And whatever you think about McDonald's hamburgers, what was going on is that the burger in a hamburger, the McDonald's hamburger, is very, very thin. So what happens is when it dries out, it's basically turns into like beef jerky, more or less.
Right. Okay.
And it doesn't allow bacteria to form. So it just because it's so so thin it'll just dry out and nothing will grow on it, and you can basically have it there for years, and it'll still look the same. Same thing with the bun. The bun will dry out, and as long as there's no moisture, it won't mold, and so that one was kind of easy to debunk. So that's just one thing that early on. As far as like some of the bigger ones, I guess, that have been most viewed on the website, there was one that was about gas prices under Bush versus Obama.
Right.
And it was saying like I think the top picture had a price of like $4.80 or $5 or something, and then the bottom was like $2 and something, and then of course it had the picture of both the presidents, and it said like, this is what happens when when your president is tied to the oil industry, insinuating that the more expensive gas was under Bush,
Sure.
So I generally when I start taking on a meme, so to speak, I go into Google and start typing. I notice I'm like, I was Googling gas prices under Bush, basically, and gas, and you get all sorts of stories, but like nobody really broke down exactly what the average price was. I'm like, they talk about various things, but I'm like, I just want the average price for his entire term of unleaded gasoline. So I'm like, well, how can I go about doing that? So eventually I found the government's website, where every week they have like the average price of gas per gallon, and basically I started when his term started and entered all that info into an Excel spreadsheet, and did the calculation, and it spit out the average gallon of gas, and then I did the same under it. At that time Obama was still president, like maybe 6 or 7 years in, so but it turned out that gas was actually quite a bit cheaper on average under Bush, especially even with adjusted for inflation. So that became, I think, my most viewed on the website as far as the Google stats went. But
what you were saying about the memes being so easily spread, it reminds me of the old expression, a lie will travel all the way around the world by the time the truth gets its trousers on. And I appreciate your attempts to bring truth to this, because it's an interesting thing. People are easily swayed by emotion, and you'll see these memes about, say, Denmark, for example, being a socialist paradise and how they're happier because of welfare and things like that, when actually when you look at both the views on happiness and on the way that their economies run, you hear quite a different story. Is that one of the ones that you've tackled?
The Denmark one?
Yeah.
No, I don't think I think I did one on Denmark once, but I should do one about the happiness if I ever see it in a proper form where it can be busted properly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would. That'd be definitely something I'd be willing to take on.
So what is it mainly stuff from the US then that you stick to? I mean, I guess there's a whole wealth of stuff just from the US.
Yeah, most of the ones I focus on come from two major U.S. meme pages on the left, which is Occupy Democrats, and the other 98%. And I focus mostly on those, one, because they just keep coming up with awful memes that make my job easy almost, because it's just constant nonsense. But also, I think Occupy Democrats has almost like 7 million followers. Other 98% has over 5 million, I believe. So it's a huge audience. So at this point, I tend to try to stick to bigger things, that are really getting spread more than just, because people will send out, some smaller pages will create, all sorts of nonsense, but if nobody really sees it, is it really worth debunking?
Yeah, the hopeful goal is that when people see those memes popping around or their friends sharing them, they pop on the Meme Policeman and say, hey, no, wait, this has been shot. And hopefully there's a certain percentage of people that will go, oh, thanks, I had the wrong information. Other people might get annoyed, but that just adds to the drama and controversy these days, which is not necessarily a bad thing when you see what it's done for some online stars like Milo Yiannopoulos and Jordan Peterson. If not for controversy, they wouldn't have had the blow-up potential that they have had.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting having a Facebook page and being able to see the stats, because everything you post, it tells you how many views, how many people have supposedly seen it. I don't know what when it says how many people have viewed it means, if they have to pause when they're scrolling, or I don't know exactly know how that's measured, but I mean some I have will have relatively low amounts, and if it gets shared by the right people, it can have an amazing amount of views, which boggles my mind. Some have been like the hundreds of thousands, and you're like, wow, like how did that happen? When it's just the crazy thing about the internet nowadays. If you get picked up by somebody going viral, it can really happen to anyone. It just takes that right post or right thing, and so yeah.
So what do you ever find? I mean, it's one of the depressing things I find is that no matter whether it's a meme or whether it's just a fact that goes around or a stat, I'm saying a fact, pseudo fact, or a stat, or something like that, no matter how many times it gets debunked, it kind of still persists, or it comes back again. Like stuff like one of the ones you consistently see is the rule of thumb thing, where apparently a man was allowed to beat his wife with a stick no longer. And it's like complete bullshit. And no matter how many times it's been debunked, that you were never allowed to beat your wife with a stick, it still keeps coming back. So I mean, some of the memes that you've debunked.
Zombies.
Yes, they are those zombie memes. So zombie memes. Yeah, some of the memes that you've debunked. Do you still see them flying around there and kind of?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, sometimes that makes my job a little easier when I'll see one that it even happens on those big pages. They'll seems like they recycle a lot of things every few months or year. Like I call them, they bring it back from the dead, and then I can just go and find when I busted it earlier, and usually it still applies.
Saves you a lot of research.
So yeah, that definitely happens. Yeah, for sure. I try to come up with new content as much as I can, so I don't like to rely on that. But yeah.
But it's strange. I think when that happens, when they resurrect stuff like that, it's almost as if you go, well, you know that this is bunk. So the only reason you must keep putting it out there is because it has an impact and it's useful. The fact that it's a lie doesn't really seem to matter to you much. But it's a great concept. I mean, I see memes out. Have you ever done it with libertarian memes or conservative memes and said, okay, that doesn't sound quite right, and had a look into it? Have you done that?
Yeah, I mean, I try to be fair across the board, okay. And kind of my bread and butter is the left-wing memes, just because I come from a libertarian, classical liberal, whatever, that sort of philosophy. So I do spend the most time going after that. But believe it or not, some of my most popular ones were conservative memes. Okay. I think there was one about mass shooters where it said like all these mass shooters were Democrats or something. So I had a list of like 20 or 15 names like going back throughout history, and it said they were all Democrats. So then I went on each one, and it actually like there was only like one that could even be considered, I think, a Democrat. And some were like socialists or something, but they weren't even. And some were just
insane, or
Republic. They had nothing.
Okay.
No basis in reality. But that one was probably maybe my second most viewed, actually. So I have no problem going if something is wrong. Like even libertarian, like particularly if it's a big libertarian page posting something that's untrue, it almost sometimes makes me more mad because our side should be better. We should be so.
We've got lots of facts and good arguments on our side already. It would be good to just promote the good stuff rather than resort to ridiculous falsehoods as a tactic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the broader mission of the Meme Policeman, I would say, is just to get people learn how to think properly about what is true and how to get to what's factual and how to approach that.
We've just been joined. We've got a wild card here. We've just been joined by our student leader, Abe Meme. Are you early or late? Are you late for the interview? Or?
Early.
All right. Okay. Well, you might as well sit down and join us.
Well, me and Peter and Bartek, we're going to do some student stuff. They're supposed to be here as well.
Well, the interesting thing about Abe being here is his online name was actually Abe the Meme. And so now that we have the Meme Policeman, he might be policing young Abe's behaviour and debunking any of his wild claims. Do you have any wild claims for us, Abe?
Wild claims? Oh, let me think of something. Libertarians have a different definition of wild from the rest of polite society, so give me a second on that one.
You might have to be physically removed.
For the good of society. for the collective good of society.
Right. So, Ryan, have you had any big hitters that we might have heard of share your memes on Twitter or Facebook that you know of?
Well, probably the biggest would be Occupy Democrats Logic is a page maybe you've heard of. They've kind of done what I have in some regard, where they take memes, particularly from Occupy Democrats, and usually they'll have the meme, and then they'll post like a picture below it of somebody like kind of arguing against it. But I think what mostly distinguishes me from that page is that I usually have a little bit longer, more in-depth source-based things analysis, where they kind of have punchy, almost as short as the meme itself response. But occasionally they will have a little bit longer things, and they have shared a couple of my things. I think they're close to 500,000 followers or something like that. So again, also Being Classically Liberal, if you know that page, has shared a couple of mine. So yeah, when like I said earlier, where some all of a sudden will get crazy amounts of views, it's usually because one of those two had shared it. Also, Tom Woods tweeted once, I think it was when I debunked the Germany and their renewable energy. There was a meme about that, like how Germany had 100% electricity from renewable energy, and I kind of broke how that is misleading down, and that Tom Woods retweeted that out, so that got a bunch. But
so how do people? I mean, do people send you memes that they want you to arrest, so to speak? I mean,
I love that. You should use that as your term for doing it. This meme gets arrested.
Yeah, early on I was deciding should it be arrested or busted. So I kind of stick with busted. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people will send things in. I mean, I pretty much get things constantly, usually at least one a day.
Okay.
Recently, especially as the page has grown, people, and I do get a lot of ideas that way, because the thing with monitoring memes is that I don't really like to do them. Honestly, there's nothing more depressing than to go on Occupy Democrats and start reading through their stuff. It makes you want to, cry your eyes out. So so
gouge your eyes out even.
I mean, I basically have to take a deep breath and okay, it's almost like work. You got to look through them. But so in general, I don't like to spend too much time.
Do you ever create any of your own memes or a counter meme even? Sort of, never. That's not really what interests you. You'd rather just tear other people's memes down.
Yeah, I'm better at tearing them down than building them up. But
Okay.
I've maybe made a couple over the years, but nothing. That's really not my talent. So there's plenty of people making memes out there. I don't think I need to add my name to that.
And of course, the rock band Cheap Trick did dedicate a song to you, the Meme Police. So what is the only a few people will get that reference, of course, but you'll have to go and Google it.
Antony Sammeroff with a cheap shot there about Cheap Trick.
Right, so
But then do you actually know who Cheap Trick were?
Is Cheap Trick from the UK?
No, I think
they're an American band. They're kind of a bit glam rocky, I guess. They have a song called The Dream Police, which is where I got.
Dream Police,
That's where I got.
See what he did there?
See what I did there. What is the future of the Meme Policeman?
Well, the future. I mean, for now, I'm going to keep doing what we're doing. So that seems to be working, and you know, it is important. But as the following keeps growing, I would like to at some point think about branching out, expanding a little bit. One of the main things in the future, I think, would be to have what I would call deputies, I guess. So like, so I'm at some point I like to do that, whereas you know, get a bunch of people together or people that write in and do their own bust, you know. But
What about a SWAT team?
yes,
That's great. You can always just say that you're open to submissions and people can send you stuff and you can decide at your own discernment whether to put them up or not.
yeah, I will do that at some point. I just have to think about how I'm going to unveil that. You know, I don't want to hurt people's feelings or have them put in a lot of work, so that's some sort of criteria of how, because it's kind of complicated, you know, because even what I do, it varies. You know, some busts can be very short. It can just be logic-based bust or like but in general, I like to break things down more. And I'm big with sources. You know, trying to find credible sources. You know, for one, because that's the proper way to do it. The other thing is that it tends to drive the liberals more crazy when you have like New York Times or government sort, you know, they're doing it instead of, you know, I'm never going to have, you know, like an InfoWars or things like, you know, like, I mean, I guess there could be a situation where I'd have more fringe sites for as a source, but in general, I like to stick with, you know, the more established I love scholarly, like studies, also.
So what would be your main go-to place for info, for good info?
It depends on the meme. Like any sort of like economics-based meme, like for economic data, you know, you want to go right to the bureau, you know, the government sources for
Statist.
I know, as much as, you know, I don't like the government, it's still like, you know, if you're looking at unemployment figures or something, and instead of just taking places, different sites, words for it or different sources, I like to go straight to it, because it's actually amazing. You'll find things that you think might be respectable, and then you look into it yourself, and it's a different. You find a different reality. So that's why I like to go straight to the data if I can, and if that's not available, then go to a trusted reporter or outlet that vets information or investigates it themselves. So.
Okay. Have you just wondered? I mean, have you done anything on sort of like crime figures and police sort of arrest figures and drugs bust figures? Have you looked into any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I've done a few. I remember one was there's a meme about mass shootings. Like in America, it was saying like there's been it was like 300 something mass shootings this year already, and then I'm like, I started looking at that, and then I realized that there was no good definition of what a mass shooting was, like, which just things like that you don't think about. People just throw out something like mass shooting. Well, what is a mass shooting? Is it 3 people, 4, and it turns out there's no federal database of mass shootings, so the numbers from that come from places like Washington Post is what I use. They had done like where they went through the crime data all over, and they, and it turned. So I think they used the definition of 3 or more victims.
Okay.
But then again, a shooting doesn't even mean somebody died, right? So it could just be. I mean, a gang shooting could be a mass shooting. Shooting outside a club. But when people hear mass shooting, they think of like when somebody shoots up a school or something. And in reality, there's a lot fewer of those.
Okay.
But
so it's kind of nebulous, the whole term, really.
Yeah, there can be, but as far as like crime, I mean, there's a lot of other outlets that do really good things with crime data. So.
I find a good source on that kind of stuff is a guy called Radley Balco. I don't know if you've heard of him. He used to write bizarrely for the Huffington Post. I think he was with the Washington Post, and now he has his own website, radleybalco.com. But he does a lot of good stuff on gun stuff, drink driving stuff, and the militarization of the police force. But he kind of tends to specialise in that sort of stuff. But he's from
the US?
He's from the US, Radley Balco. He's been on John Stossel's show a few times, and I was particularly impressed with it. I mean, he came on John Stossel's show and made the claim that drink driving was statistically really wasn't as prevalent as everybody thought it was. And he made a good case. He wasn't suggesting that it was all right to go about drink driving, but he just suggested that there were far more dangerous. Sleep deprivation was a greater cause of road accidents and deaths than drink driving was. But yeah, he's an interesting guy and pretty good on his research as well. But definitely anything to do with police work, crime work, militarization of the police force. Radley Balco is my kind of go-to. First stop of call. I'll always cross-reference it, but he's the first guy I'll go to. What about you, Antony? Who's your weapon of choice?
Is there a particular? You sprung it on me.
I do that shit.
I like to check out the Mises Institute sometimes because they tend to have a good article on something or other, whatever comes up.
But mainly economics,
mainly economics, but also sometimes civil liberties and war. I have my own blog as well, seeingnotSeen.blogspot.com.
How could I have forgot?
Which I don't publicise that much, but mostly
what's it called again?
Seeing Not Seen at .blogspot.com. And I usually try and debunk economics myths and that. But nowadays with the internet, it's so much easier to get good information. It's also much easier to get bad information. Yeah. But I started writing a bunch of books, most of which have not been finished yet. But I just think about the research that I would have had to do if I didn't have the access to both scientific journals and newspaper articles from decades going back. I can write an article on something and have one source from a lefty newspaper like The Guardian and one source from a right-leaning newspaper like The Telegraph, and put together their findings together to draw a picture, a conclusion, and you can really give people shortcuts to good information by putting it together. Well, I really hope that when people see one of these memes, they'll check you out and see if you've taken it kicking and screaming to jail.
So where can they tell us all again where we can find your website?
Yeah, it's the website is memepoliceman.com, so just MEME policeman.com, and we do a lot of busts there as well. Right now I've actually been doing most of the stuff on the Facebook page itself. So the Facebook page is just the Meme Policeman. Type that in, it should come up. So I've been doing most of the busts there, and then kind of the more in-depth, larger ones, I've switched to the website now, so I tend to use the website for the ones that are a little bit too long to fit in, a blurb on a Facebook post. So, and yeah, if anybody has a meme that they're concerned about or they know is wrong, then yeah, send it through the messenger. Just the one note about that is, I do have another job, and I can only spend so much time, doing this website. So I do look at everything that comes in, and there's a lot of good ones. But the way I approach things, a lot of time, it does take a lot of time to do some research and put a buzz, because I want a high quality, something that people can, share with confidence. So it's so don't be offended if it doesn't it's definitely not everyone that gets sent in. I do. It's way less than half. So, but I do appreciate people sending them in.
Sure.
And
it takes time and effort to keep the streets clean.
And we wish you all the best with that venture. Hopefully it grows and grows until you have cleaned the streets of meme scum, left-wing meme scum.
And right-wing meme scum. Well, thank you, Ryan, for joining us on the Scottish Liberty podcast. Please, everyone at home, follow the Meme Policeman on Facebook and check.
He'll follow you. Okay, carry on, Antony. Sorry. On that sinister note. Sorry.
I had to get Tam's hearty laugh at his own joke so that you can see the quality of person that he is.
You have to do.
Well, you have to be your own number one fan, because if you don't believe it, why should anyone else? And I'm proud to say that Scottish Liberty Podcast is my favourite podcast. Until next time, be libertarians.
Don't be a righty.
Or a lefty. Excellente. I don't know how to shut this.